Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. Today I'm going to talk about the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's horror story, their sex trafficking. And as I've always said, that my focus is on the survivors and the survivors like Virginia Giuffre who succumbed to their trauma. And for us to be able to hear their stories, believe their stories, and then demand accountability from the rich and famous and the elite who were part of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's diabolical universe of child sex trafficking. Now, with the help of Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, these are two representatives. Ro Khanna is Democratic and Thomas Massie is far right. But on this, they have come together and they had hearings and held a press conference outside of Congress where Jeffrey Epstein survivors and Ghislaine Maxwell survivors got to speak. And then there was an episode on NBC, and I believe that now that these women are empowered, that some of them didn't even know about the other people who existed. And now that about 100 of them spoke out and stood there in solidarity and said at a news conference that even if the DOJ doesn't release the files on the names, that the survivors were going to compile their own list of Epstein clients. And that's a big deal to me, because I think that is these brave women taking power into their own hands, understanding that this is the moment where they have to unite, because it is that big of a deal. There are that many people who were affected, and even one woman subjected to that sort of sex trafficking is too many. But in this case, there are hundreds. And to be able to tell those stories, and because the DOJ will not and is not helping, and Donald Trump is calling it a hoax. And think about how so one of the survivors of this Epstein Maxwell dystopia actually voted for Trump, and so she came on television and she said, "I voted for him. He's supposed to protect us." Yet Donald Trump and Donald Trump's DOJ are withholding the files, and they keep releasing portions of Epstein files that are already out in public, but not the names, not the list of Epstein's clients. And that has now forced these women into a position of power, because they are together now. They know they're not alone, and they're going to compile the list. And the problem would have risen that had they compiled the list and published it, they would be susceptible to lawsuits that would bankrupt all of them. Because clearly the people who are on the list are rich and influential people. So this is something for which I think that I will have respect for Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. And that is because they came out and said that, well, what we are going to do is that they are going to compile the names, these survivors, and then give it to us. And we, as representatives of the government, of the people, have a speech or debate clause protection for whatever we say on the floor of the House. And so we are going to read out the names for the congressional record, and under the protection of the speech or debate clause, these names when they come out, thereby giving the survivors the shield required to compile the names. Because I believe that by making that statement, in many ways, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna is saying we're trying to not even get to that moment. We're trying to get to DOJ to give us the names and the files and be open and transparent about it. But if it gets to that, and if it gets to the survivors compiling the names, then those survivors become part of the instrumentality of that of the investigation that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have undertaken, and the entire Democratic caucus and 3 Republicans alongside with Thomas Massie, I think Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert, they're my, disagreement, for lack of a fairer term, notwithstanding, they are standing up for these women and these survivors. And I believe that there needs to be a handful more of Republicans who come out and who pass the resolution and who pass this law to have transparency, to bring up the names. And even before that, Donald Trump and DOJ have the ability to publish those names and the list, and they can do that at any time. But now is what gives me encouragement, and in saying that hell hath no fury like women scorned, is that these women have now joined together. They realize the power of the moment. They realize that this is the moment for them to tell their stories. And I hope that they get to tell their stories. And if the end of it ends with Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie reading the names of the list that is part of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's sordid universe, then the whole country will be listening. So thank you for listening, and please share and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.